It seems the memories eaten away by the rotting sickness yet remain, but faintly.
Alright, welcome back to Honored Madman, and we've got what I would have to refer to as a bite-sized video today. So everybody loves the Cleanrot Knights. They're the golden sworn swords to Malenia and the commanders of her army, or at least the ones with the halo scythe are. Now, interestingly, the Japanese character that their name is written with more accurately translates to a type of noble rot, like the kind that would affect wine grapes. Now, I do think the localization change to Cleanrot was effective. I mean, it does sound, foreign and strange and a lot more interesting than noble rot. But the idea that it is a noble kind of rot is very interesting to me, and that should have been left in a type of, description somewhere, armor description, weapon, what have you. Mainly because it's evocative of the Roa fruit, or the golden Roa fruit, which are basically like these inedible grapes that are essentially found in various forms all throughout the lands between. And of course, the noble kind of rot could just be a bit more, symbolic or metaphorical, because the Cleanrot Knights are said to be these heroically legendary knights, but they were affected by a unique type of rot. And this is something that they're wholly characterized by. These knights are interesting because they knew that serving Malenia would result in them becoming afflicted with the scarlet rot and the eventual putrefaction of their flesh. But this didn't stop them. In fact, it made them fight twice as hard. Now, when Malenia went nuclear and turned Caelid into the red wasteland that it is today, one of these knights, named Finley, decided to carry her sorry ass all the way back to the Hallowed Tree, making that also turn into a rot-infested paradise. Now sure, some of the Cleanrot Knights that were left behind managed to take refuge in the Shaded Castle, the lord of which was a follower of the old rot religion and Malenia's biggest fan, so he naturally extended his hospitality to these wayward knights, much to the annoyance of his staff. This naturally resulted in several residents of the castle becoming afflicted with scarlet rot, and eventually they became too weak to stop the inevitable prison riot from happening at the hands of Elmer of the Briar, a former ascetic from the lands of Yochade who had turned to a life of merchant killing. And the Cleanrot Knights, who were actually lucky enough to perish in the battle against Radahn's Redmanes, continue this fight even in death in the war-dead catacombs against the ghostly remains of the Redmane Knights and soldiers. It's a very interesting situation. It shows that these guys' conflict was so deep that it persists even into death. So aside from all of them and the ones that made it back to the Hallowed Tree, you'll find the Cleanrot Knights patrolling the Aeonian swamp that was created by their patron. Some of them even lay submerged beneath the Crimson Swamp and rise up to attack any trespassers. This has led to some speculation as to whether or not the swamp was animating these corpses and using them to defend its lands. Which itself sort of reminds me of the Dragon Slayer armor from Dark Souls 3, first animated by the Pilgrim Butterflies and then later by the Abyssal Swamp. Each time it was essentially an inanimate piece of armor that retained the memories of the various hunts that its owner used to wear it through. Now, personally, I find this to be true, but I don't think the Cleanrot Knights are just empty suits. In fact, if you take a close look at them, they've got several of these little branches or root-like fungi things sticking out of their various openings in their armor. In the game files, these are referred to as, unsurprisingly, cordyceps. The parasitic genus of fungi that everybody thinks Last of Us invented? Well, long story short, it's effectively a type of fungus that gets into a subject, let's call them a subject, and eventually it sort of grows its roots through their whole body and is able to puppet them about, reanimating them, as it were, as the fungus does usually kill them when it's spreading its many tendrils and roots throughout their entire body and organ system. So it looks like the Cleanrot Knights are piloted by some new form of scarlet rot fungi that's very similar to the cordyceps of real life. And I believe their shaky standing up position is sort of evidence to this. The commander ones who wield the scythe even appear to possess the ability to hack up swamp water, specifically of the Aeonian variety. And this is even done by the ones who have managed to escape the swamp, so I mean it shows you how that the Aeonian swamp, it sort of stays with you. And another thing I noticed about the Cleanrot Knights of the swamp was that they appear to exhibit some hive mind-like behavior. For example, some of them don't rise out of the swamp when you walk past them and will only rise after a certain other Cleanrot Knight has been taken out. And again, maybe it's just me, but the others seem to home in on your position once you start a fight with one of them. Now maybe this is just a coincidence, but it seemed to happen to me every time I tried to get footage down in the swamp of these knights, but it's something I thought worth mentioning. So maybe these Cleanrot knights are part swamp now, but what if it went even further than that? What if there's actual pests inside the armor? Now bear with me on this because much like the larval kindred of rot, this idea is rather half-formed. But let's take a closer look at the behavior of the Cleanrot knights and their movement patterns. First off, let's look at how these guys walk. Now they're very hunched over and limping, propping themselves up with their weapon, usually a spear or the famous halo scythe. They sort of gimp their way through the swamp. Now sure, there are a handful of hunched over wandering enemies in this game, but there's one in particular that they bear or at least their posture bears a striking resemblance to, the kindred of rot. Now I'm not necessarily saying that the Cleanrot knights are turning into these kindred prawn, but let's take a look at what we know of the life cycle of these beings. We know they don't start off this big, they start off in a somewhat larval stage, basically a smaller version of what they are now, capable of using a lesser version of the pest threads attack. And obviously, just like the big ones, they look like they're wearing one of them seashells on their head and they sort of crawl around. They're a lot less mobile than their bigger counterparts, but presumably these small guys eventually grow into the big ones. It only makes sense. But where do the pests come from? I mean, obviously they started naturally occurring in some way after Malenia's explosion, but who's breeding them? Well, that would have to be the Mushroom Men, the servants of rot, humans who were mutated by Malenia's explosion and devoted themselves to Caelid and the Scarlet Rot as a whole, as well as Malenia herself. These fellows assist the larger kindred of rot in the cultivation of more of their kind. A great example can be found in the cellar of the Caelid Waypoint ruins, where the coffins have been opened up and filled with eggs. Presumably the dead matter present inside the coffins assists in the cultivation of these pests. I mean, it makes sense, I guess. Don't maggots just sort of spawn on a dead body if it's left unattended long enough? Now, another example of this form of pest breeding can be found unsurprisingly at the Hallig tree. So out back behind the tree's rot temple is a graveyard, and it appears to be a much larger breeding ground than the one in the Caelid Waypoint ruins. And once again, they appear to have converted the graves into little egg dens for their pests to hatch from. So they are apparently born of death, but they aren't necessarily undead. They're something new, born from the stagnation and the scarlet rot. It's almost as if they're spawned entirely by rotted graveyards that were affected by the Scarlet Aeonia. And personally, I think the human-like hands they have, even if they have what appears to be hundreds of them, are evidence of this. Human matter is essentially required for their creation, much like the land octos that are cultivated by the Vulgar Militia. And just like those Lovecraftian watchdogs, evidence of this human matter can still be found in their physiology today. With land octopuses, it's the ovary, and with kindred of rot, it's their hands. Now, seeing this made me start thinking, what if some of those Cleanrot knights who fell in the swamp, well, what if when they died, their body became essentially a breeding ground for pests, but it was all trapped inside that golden armor, causing the pests to grow and adapt and sort of form into the set of armor? Sure, he'd be lacking his distinctive seashell head, but I think it definitely has to be a possibility. I mean, they walk in the same way, they're both rot associated, and they're found in basically the same regions. In fact, the only place they're not both found is the Shaded Castle. And yeah, I'm sure there's a way I could probably clip through their armor and see that they aren't quite pests, but I definitely think at the very least their movements and, how they're just patrolling the swamp is meant to evoke the same image of the pests sort of just staggering around the roads of Caelid with their little rot dogs and whatnot. Which reminds me, we can see the Cleanrot knights hanging out with rot dogs in the Shaded Castle, so, another possible connection. Plus, it sort of goes all in line with the whole rot philosophy of, something born from the stagnation and the rot, something new. Now, lore-wise, I never found the Cleanrot knights to really be all that cool. I struggle to understand why anybody would fight for somebody if it was a guarantee that they were going to get some sort of eldritch leprosy from it. Why would they sign up for this? I mean, I know medieval people and fantasy characters and stuff like that are just simply built different, but I personally like to think that maybe they were compelled by Miquella to serve his sister. I mean, the descriptions do say that he knows well how to compel affection. But the Cleanrot knights must be genuine fanatics for their leader, Malenia, and it's pretty evident in their looks. I mean, they're stylized to look just like her, and they willingly accepted the rot into their bodies by choosing to serve her. They're basically just a bunch of Malenia cosplayers who decided to follow her into battle and wound up on an almost undefeated campaign until they came across Kindred and Radon. And we all know what happened there. Malenia went boom and several of the knights began the long process of having their skin fall off. I mean, take a look at that. They're either turning into pests or they have no business being still alive with open sores like that, if that is indeed what those are. But even that wasn't enough, because then essentially several of them were left behind in this wasteland to, I guess, fend for themselves. Meanwhile, we've got the proud Redmane Knights, who knew they would never see home again, so they dedicated themselves to staving off the Scarlet Rot with fire. Now sure, they weren't really too successful at this. I mean, they're still in the process of doing it as we speak, but you've definitely got to admire their resolve, and definitely appreciate the fact that that's a hell of a lot more respectable and even cooler than what the Cleanrot Knights were doing. I mean, the Redmane Knights are just trying to protect Kindred and, salvage what's left of this homeland. And the Cleanrot Knights are essentially the possibly brainwashed fanatics of a walking WMD. Let me know what you guys think. I mean, which knight is cooler? Do you guys agree with the whole idea that these Cleanrot Knights, at least the ones in the swamp, might possibly just be possessed either by the swamp via the suspected Scarlet Rot cordyceps, or by colonies of little pests, or by one big pest that sort of just grew into the armor? I personally find all three of these schools of thought to be valid and to have merit, and even then I'm still open to other people's interpretations of what's going on with the Cleanrot Knights, at least the ones in the swamp. But yeah, this video was just meant to be one of my few little bite-sized lore entries, because I didn't want to go too off subject on my Desolation of Malenia video that's upcoming, but I'll probably finish the Aldia one first. So I guess think of this as like a sort of preview of the Malenia's Desolation one. Anyway though, I hope you guys found it to be at least somewhat informative or amusing, and if you liked it, please like it. If you disliked it, please dislike it. And if you like hearing me ramble on for varying lengths of time, please consider subscribing. We just cracked 24K, pretty big deal to me. As always, you guys know I'll keep cracking the videos out as long as you keep watching, but at the risk of rambling for too long and no longer leaving this to be a bite-sized video, let's have our outro and a couple final thoughts and be out of here. So I was going through some of my videos trying to make this new playlist for Elden Ring and, Dark Souls videos and whatnot. And I realized I never did a video on Albinoric, so I'll have to fix that at some point. But I think my next quick video will probably have to be about the Fallout series. One last video before it comes out, because they finally released their final trailer and whatnot. Naturally, I've got a lot to say. But yeah, as I always say, that Aldia video is coming soon. It's sort of becoming like the new Ranny video in many ways, but I won't let it get to be, that far or that much of a delay. Anyway, though, I'll probably just cut this ramble short here, but let me know in the comments what you guys think. If, if you think the Cleanrot Knights are becoming pests, or if you think that their similar sort of gait and appearance is just meant to be symbolic. But yeah, I will see you guys real soon, and as always, be safe, and see ya.